Pope Clement V refused to respond to the charges and the confessions of the Templars until the pressure was so enormous that, due to the mounting pressure, what happened is he summoned 72 people, and he questioned all of them. And before these many witnesses, the Templars admitted their crimes and previously confessed during the trials by Philip. And what happened is they were burned alive on a stake. But don't forget, that is not the end, because following the death of their leader, Monsieur de Mulay, the Templars found refuge in Portugal under King Denis II, who became their protector. And so, now, the Illuminati, those who were enlightened, those who knew better, those who worship another god, those who worship Satan to be their god, are not allowed to be shown publicly. They went underground. So what they did, they created a fake mythology, some sort of a story, in order to test the ground. This is a well-calculated move by that secret order that allowed them to monitor Europe's openness to the occult. So what they did, the story elaborates on how Mr. Christian Rosenkreuz is the Rose Cross. Look, they say that he traveled to Syria and Egypt to study the occult, and after learning from all the great masters of the occult philosophy in the Middle East and Northern Africa, he returned to Europe to spread his enlightenment throughout the continent, but he was unfavorably received, and then he returned home to Germany, where he had hoped to establish a society. And he goes on and on and on until the 18th century. The 18th century is actually the century of, or the era of the Enlightenment. Go to the books, go to the encyclopedia. 18th century, you will see the era of enlightenment. Again, enlightenment. Again, light. Again, a false light. People were running to universities. People were learning the occult. People were absorbing anything that they could find. And that is the Illuminati in the 18th century. And during that time, something horrible happened. Are you ready for that? Two people born 2 different years in Germany, one in Frankfurt, one in Ingolstadt in Germany. And amazing how much Germany pumped so much evil at that time in history. And I want you to understand that at that time there was a Jewish man called Amschel Moses Bauer. Mr. Bauer was so humiliated by the German non-Jews. Jews at that time were not even allowed to walk freely with every other person. Whenever a Gentile came, they had to clear the road to allow him to walk first. And then he was so humiliated that he promised that when the day comes, he will become so wealthy that they will serve him. And it's interesting because Amschel Bauer opened in 1743 a coin shop for rare coins in Frankfurt, Germany. And right above his store, he put a big shield of the Roman eagle, and it was a red shield. And it was known to be the Red Shield Firm. Rothschild in German, the Rothschild. That's how they began. Mr. Amschel Moses Bauer. Of course, he died, but not before that. His son, Meyer Amschel Bauer, was able to study, to be excellent, to be super in his intelligence. You know, Jewish people in those days were so smart. They had to be, because they were a minority. They were afraid that they would be stepped on by all the others. In order to survive, they had to show excellence. And he studied, and he was an excellent person. And he went up in the ladder, so much so that some of the people that were hiring him actually introduced him to the king of Germany of that time, and to the kings of Europe of that time. And he befriended them, and he started working with them to create a banking system, world banking system. And he learned the art of making money and mostly loaning money to people. But then he realized that loaning money to the individual is not making much money. Actually, loaning money to governments, to leaders, that's the big money. And that's how he started. And when he had acquired enough money, he went back to Frankfurt and he bought his father's shop, and he called himself from now on Mr. Meyer Rothschild. And that's how the Rothschild family was born. Bear in mind, they had no relations to their Jewish roots. They never counted themselves Jews at that time. Mr. Meyer was so enlightened that he never counted himself a Jew. He counted himself illuminated. He counted himself as a servant of Satan to bring about world domination and one world government. He could care less if the Jews are going to die because of it or not. He could care less what the consequences on the... That's why Jesus said, by the way, in Revelation chapter 3, it says, be aware of those who say that they are Jews, but they're actually not. They are the synagogue of Satan, the Bible says. And so you need to understand that we have Meyer Rothschild, determined to take over the world with his wealth. By the way, he gave birth, not him, his wife, to 5 sons, and he placed every son in a different city in Europe. One went to Vienna, one went to London, one went to Naples, and of course, one was in Paris, and he himself stayed in Frankfurt. And the interesting thing about it is that those sons even were better than their father in making money. And I'll teach you how. But before that, I want you to know that before he died, he made sure that his plan will be carried out by someone who's very sophisticated. At the time, in February 6, 1748, Mr. Adam Weishaupt was born in Ingolstadt, Bavaria. Influenced by the French philosopher Voltaire, he actually started looking into the occult, and he said in 1776 he founded the first Illuminati order. Up until now, all the Illuminati were never calling themselves Illuminati. They were just illuminated, they were just enlightened, but they never used the word Illuminati. In 1776, on May 1st, the first time an organization calls himself officially Illuminati and opened his first lodge. And Mr. Meyer Rothschild is giving him the money and is sitting with him and plotting how his money and this man's teaching are going somehow to take over the whole world. Mr. Hauptstadt was actually a Jesuit priest who was actually leaving his faith in God and ready to take over the world because of his influence by the occult. And somehow, at some point, the messenger that carried the secret writings of the Illuminati died along the way, and the documents were found, and they were published, and the whole world were roaring because of the fact that there is a group of people that is now plotting to take over the world. Now Meyer, Rothschild, and Hauptstadt actually knew that they cannot really write who they are. They wanted to disguise as if it's a Jewish plot to take over the world, and they wrote it in a way that whoever finds it will actually accuse the Jews for that. And that is exactly what happened. Jewish people were accused all around Western and Eastern Europe, and thousands of them died in attacks. Now, before he died, Mr. Rothschild told his son 3 things. 1, whenever you have a job, an important position in our family's business, only you should be there. Don't let any foreigner take that position. If your daughter is marrying someone else, he cannot be in that position. Only direct bloodline. 2nd, he told them, marry 2nd-degree cousins. Don't intermarry with others. We need to keep the wealth within our own bloodline. 3rd, he said, never give any account to anyone about what you have and how much you have. Up until today, there is no document that specifies how much the Rothschild family really owns. They all keep his commandments very well. And so, Mr. Meyer Rothschild died, and now his sons are all over Europe. But there's only one problem. They're all over France, all over Germany, all over England, all over Belgium, all over. Only the Russians are not allowing them a footstep in their territory. That's why the Rothschilds, with the Illuminati right now, are now plotting to kick this Tsar of Russia out. How? You just have to train some people with the new theory called what? Marxism. It's called what? communism, and then you send them in, and a revolution takes place, and the Tsar is out. And now we control that part also. You must understand, the Illuminati is controlling the world in a way that that is not really showing any allegiance, they're not somehow loyal to a particular thing. For them, it's a double talk. For them, every force tends to have an opposite counterforce. The conflict between the two results in a new situation. You see, every thesis must have an antithesis, and that brings the synthesis. You understand that? And then, of course, that's how the synthesis is helping them. The insertion, you have to understand, this is a double talk and a double think. That's how they do. They feed the world of wealth, and they feed the communists, and at the same time they can oppress these and oppress those and make sure there are wars, and they give money to this side of the war. They gave money to the French Revolution. They gave money to the Civil War in America. They gave money to both sides in World War I. They gave money to both sides on World War II. They gave money to both sides in the Cold War. They always supported two sides because it served their interests. It is the thesis and the antithesis, and they wanted the synthesis. And remember that. And so, we're coming to that point where Rothschild is very strong. His son is Nathan Rothschild. He's the one who is placed in England. Have you ever heard the name Waterloo? Have you ever heard the name ABBA, the band, the Swedish band? Have you ever heard the song Waterloo? Never mind. Anyway, Waterloo is a place. Today is in Belgium. At that time, it was in the hands of the Netherlands. And there was a big battle there between Napoleon and Britain and Germany. That was, of course, on June 15, 1815. And you have to understand that the Duke of Wellington, on behalf of the British, and the King of Prussia were against Napoleon. That the whole world was holding its breath. Who's going to win? The stock market of London was holding its breath. They all knew if Napoleon wins, the British stock market is going to collapse. But if Britain will win, the stocks will soar. So what happened is, Mr. Nathan Rothschild had his secret courier, secret envoy in the battlefield to observe what's going on. On 18th of June, just 3 days into the battle, he came all the way to London and he reported to Nathan that Napoleon is being defeated. Nathan is sitting in his room and he says, I cannot report that. I must use this information to create disinformation to benefit from both. So he went to the Department of War and said, my person says that Napoleon is actually winning. He actually went to the stock market and started selling all of his stocks. So all the traders thought, wow, if Nathan Rothschild, that wealthy man, is selling all of his stocks, we're losing the battle. Everybody started selling all their stocks. The stocks plunged a penny for the dollar. And just 10 minutes before the messenger, the real messenger of the fight, came to report their victory, Nathan Rothschild bought all the stocks. And immediately, he was the wealthiest man in England, and he bought the Bank of England of that time. His brothers and his descendants now moving to New York, and they bought the Central Bank of America. And the Federal Reserve today is not the Federal Reserve which you think as a Central Bank of America. It is a privately owned bank by the Rothschild family. And you probably don't even know that. So we're coming to the point where we have to remember that we're dealing with superpowers of people. The Bavarian Illuminati is no longer there. Now, we're entering into the 19th century, and a new organization was born. Now, you have to understand. The Freemasons started in 1717 in London. They were not a bad organization. They were actually the guilds of the builders who were in Europe at that time. They were building cathedrals and churches and hospitals, and there were a bunch of people who wanted to just sit together and maybe do something good with their money. The problem was that whenever the real Illuminati was banned, they decided to infiltrate into the ranks of the Freemasons and take a ride on them. And that is exactly what happened. And now, from 1801 and on, all Freemason lodges are actually Illuminati lodges. All of them. Therefore, you see that the leader of them, the Grand Commander of the Supreme Council, the 33 degree in the Masons level, he's the one who wrote in his book, Lucifer, the Light Bearer. He is the one who bears the light, doubt it not. In fact, another lady, Russian lady, who was 32nd degree in the ancient primitive rite of England, in that Freemason, she wrote, "It is Satan who is the God of our planet and the only God. Satan, or Lucifer, represents the centrifugal energy of the universe, this ever-living symbol of self-sacrifice for the intellectual independence of humanity." And now we enter into the 20th century. Ladies and gentlemen, Albert Einstein was an amazing, brilliant person, and he sensed in his brilliance that something is terribly wrong. Albert Einstein wrote, "The minority, the ruling class at present, has the schools and the press and even usually the church as well, and under its thumb. And this enables it to organize and sway the emotions of the masses and make its tool of them." Today, in the 20th century, the Illuminati formed itself now into a cartel of international bankers, industrialists based mostly in Western Europe and in North America. The names of certain families you all know is the Rothschild and the Rockefeller, Morgan, Lazard, Walburg, Schroeder, and Schiff. By the way, only 3 are Jewish families. All the rest are not. In fact, one of them is Chinese, the family of Li. And I know that you may not know that, but they started creating organizations. The Council of Foreign Relations in 1921, the Bilderbergers in 1954, the Club of Rome in 1968, the Trilateral Commission in 1973, the Freemasons are saturated by the Rothschild, the Rotary, the YMCA, and so many Christians innocently belong to those organizations, not knowing that they are saturated, they are filled with Illuminati in their highest levels. David Rockefeller himself, in a Bilderberger meetings on June 1991, said, "It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural sovereignty of the intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries." David Rockefeller, in his own biography, Memoirs, wrote in page 405, "Some believe that we, the Rockefeller family, are part of the secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as an internationalist and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I'm proud of it." That's what he himself said. And you know, one of the congressmen in the 1970s exposed it. He said in a speech, Congressman Larry McDonald, he says, "The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies, it is to create a one-world government combining super capitalism and communism under the same tent, all under the control. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent." And you know what? Mr. McDonald boarded a Korean Airlines flight, a 747 flight, and he shot down by the Soviets. The whole plane. They killed all the passengers just so they can get him. Isn't that amazing? You know, in the 20th century, they came out to light. In 1980, they erected in Georgia the Georgia Guidestones, in which the Illuminati wrote all of their guidelines, the 10 commandments of them. And the first commandment, just look at how the Guidestones look like, in several languages, even in Hebrew and Arabic and English and Chinese. And what they wrote there on the stone is, the first one is maintaining humanity under 500 million people. They declare, we're too many people on this planet. We need to lower the number in order to have quality of life. How do you do that? You create wars. You say, look, this is what he said about you. You say to this one, look, this is what he said about you. You start a war between them. Then you give money to this side, and you give money to this side, and they kill each other, and they fight. And 6 million Jews are dying here, and 12 million people are dying there. And it doesn't matter because we have to reduce the planet to 500 million. We are too many. Right now we're over 6 billion. Can you imagine what they're planning? Can you imagine the scope of what they are planning for us in the near future? We're too many people. By the way, I read at least 80 different quotations of leaders, of bankers, of media people that are all saying we're too many people. Unbelievable. Can you imagine? And on the base of that sculpture, there was a stone, and it says that the sponsors of that sculpture is a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. And I was wondering, what is the age of reason? And when I Googled, I found that the Age of Reason is actually a book written by Thomas Paine, and he's a man who was a deist. He believed that the Bible is consisted of mythology and had value only as a piece of literature, but has no divine inspiration at all. Ladies and gentlemen, they came out in the open once again. As the world going away from Christ, they feel more and more comfortable to come and surface and be there out in the open. And now the 21st century came. In a New Scientist magazine, October 19 of 2011, they found out that the most of the wealth of the world is actually held by 1,300 companies. But if you really go and dig deep, only 147 companies are so tightly knit together that they control 40% of the world fortune. Only 147 companies. 40% of the world. You understand? There's a group of people, about 13 families, that control the entire financial system of the world. But they are so frustrated because Filipinos are too many. Because Israelis are going too many. Because Arabs are expanding. Because, they are actually very encouraged with the Europeans. They're actually shrinking. They're so frustrated. Now they're out in the open. They want to show the world that Satan is the one whom they should adorn. You know what? A week ago, on July 26, 2015, Satanists came together in the city of Detroit in America. And then what they did, they unveiled a satanic statue of Baphomet, the same goat-headed person that the Knight Templars worship. And look what they did. The Satanic Temple unveiled the 1-ton statue at an industrial building near Detroit River just before 11:30 p.m. local time as supporters cheered, "Hail Satan!" Media was not allowed in. So how do I know about that? Somebody actually recorded that on an iPhone. Actually, I managed to capture the first 5 seconds of the unveiling of that sculpture. You want to see it? It's horrible. It's not even funny. It is sickening. People, you should have seen the people that were walking into that place, all dressed in suits. What you saw on the stage is actually those who were dancing before the people. But they were all the elite of America of that time. Actually, they told the media one thing, all the media went there, and they texted the people, now go to the other place, and secretly all of them went to the other place without media coverage, and I got it from somebody's iPhone. And now it's out in the open. Satan is worshipped, and it's Hail Satan all over the world. Psalm 2 says, "Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed one, saying, let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us." People don't want God. They want to break that cord, break those chains. They think that God is putting them in chains. They want to be free from God, and this is who they want to worship. They don't understand that's the bondage. Him whom the Son set free is free indeed. And the truth shall set you free, nothing else. Isaiah tells us how Satan himself wanted to be like God, and that is why God casted him and brought him down to Sheol, to the lowest depth of the pit. And so how do you think they communicate all of their things to the public? Through what we call esoteric symbols. Symbols that only certain people can understand. You know, our society is shaped by our morals and beliefs, and our morals and beliefs are influenced by what we watch, read, and hear. And I'm sick of seeing what people are actually doing and watching and seeing and hearing. It's unbelievable. And what has become acceptable in society today and not given even a second thought would have been rated 18 or triple X even 20 years ago. Now let me show you some of the symbols so you understand how our children are being fed by the Illuminati every day. The lightning bolt. Take a look at the lightning bolt. Lucifer thrown from heaven. Look at Lady Gaga showing the lightning bolt. Look even the Nazis that are putting the SS as the lightning bolt. I want you to continue to the all-seeing eye, which is the Lucifer eye of observing us all the time. And I can continue to the Eye of Horus, the third eye. That's why they hide one eye to show only one, as a third eye, invisible eye, which provides perception beyond ordinary sight, enlightenment. And look how many of the people, look at the third eye, that's what it looks like. And you want to know how many people are showing that one eye? Take a look how many celebrities are doing that. All of them. Of course, Lady Gaga is leading, but you can see all of them, one after the other. They think that it's cool. Many of them actually are truly aware of the fact that they serve Illuminati.